Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 73 of the Hardly Millennial podcast, where we are young and dumb and full of
opinions, man.
We're full of opinions, guys. That's right. Full of opinions. As always, or I should say, as most of the time, we are your host. My name is Adam.
I'm Matthew Lynn. It's great to be here.
Welcome, guys. So today, what to talk about today? Well, we were discussing this a little bit outside earlier, and we think we haven't touched on, at least just to start with, we haven't spoken about space for a while, or at least you and I have not spoken about space for a while. I had
not on the podcast, at least.
Yeah, I had a few little conversations with I think like Kyle and Vince when I was at my parents' house sitting. But as far as you and I go. So one thing I wanted to bring up was a video that I had mentioned to you earlier that I watched. And it was this half-hour video of like what's going to happen in the future of our universe, right?
Oh, yeah, you were telling me about that.
Yeah.
It starts from now and goes to like a fucking trillion years
Yeah,
from now.
so that was the first thing that blew my mind with it, right? Was because when I first clicked on this thing, I thought it was just like I don't know, I thought it was going to be very like science fiction. Like at this point, we're going to create a sphere around the sun to harness its energy, like shit like that.
Right.
And then I remember when I clicked on it, I just like clicked to the middle of the video just to see where we were at with all this. And the first thing that came up was like this raging black hole getting bigger and bigger.
Oh my Lord.
And they had a little year thing at the bottom, and it said like 1 billion trillion years from 2019.
Wow.
And
that's a long time to cover in half an hour.
Yes, and let me tell you, dude, my mind was just blown away from this thing.
So I would imagine absolute chaos ends up happening, right?
I mean, yes, definitely on like less happens, but the things that are happening are like on a much larger scale, right?
Okay, yeah, I got you. So walk us through it a little bit. What happens?
So one thing that I feel like a lot of astronomers and astrophysicists, what they start with and they end with, they're always talking about the Big Bang, and then they basically just end with, at some point all the stars are going to die, right?
Yeah.
And that's usually the last bit you get, right? You're just
it just goes black.
The stars are going to die, it goes black, right?
Yeah.
So when this video got to this particular part, which was like 5 minutes in, by the way.
Oh, we weren't even close to, we weren't even halfway done.
Well, and they even made mention in there. They were like, when all the stars die, that's like, we're just like exiting the womb. Like that's like such a small beginning part of the universe.
Well, what else could happen? It's all black once the stars are dead. There's no more light.
Well, so one thing is when stars die,
well, there might be light.
They turn kind of sort of
still
like
energy.
Somewhat in like explosions. I can't remember all the details, but there are little pockets of light everywhere. But one of the first things it was talking about is when the stars die, they actually turn into these things called black dwarfs.
Okay.
Which is literally just when that star at that point it's actually a dwarf, because the sun dies, becomes either like a white or a red dwarf.
So it's not burning anymore?
It's not burning anymore. It burns up all its energy. It burns up all its gas. So yeah, it just becomes this like floating ball of hardened carbon.
Oh, wow.
And so, but it takes so long for a star to get to this point that they don't think there's any stars in our current universe that's like a black dwarf.
Oh, we haven't even gone long enough yet to have one exist yet.
Exactly.
And we've been going a long fucking time.
Exactly.
Wow, that's insane.
And then once you have that, so now you have so space is just black at this point. Space is just dark. There's no light anywhere except for maybe some of the light that's still being sucked in by black holes sporadically around the universe. But so
love those guys.
Yeah. Well, so then what ends up happening is basically over time you have these black dwarfs that are floating around, and there might be little pockets of light if these black dwarfs happen to collide with each other. But for the most part, all that ends up happening is they just end up getting sucked into black holes eventually. And we have a name for these eras. So at one point when all the black dwarfs are gone, it's called the black hole era. and literally the universe is just nothing but black holes and black holes colliding with each other
They should
and
call it the Snow
interacting with
White
each
era.
other. The Snow White era.
Yeah, because there's a bunch of black dwarfs.
See what you did there?
Yeah, you like that?
So
Anyway.
you get to this black hole era, and at this point there's no light to even suck up anymore. So it's just these black holes running around, bending space-time and interacting with each other. And remember, at this point, the timeline's like 1 trillion years in the future.
We're super duper long gone.
We're super long
It's not even
gone.
planets and shit anymore. It's just black holes floating around.
Just black holes floating around.
So it's soaked up all of the information.
all of the information.
So
yes.
you could almost argue that at that point, there's no reality. Because
Well-
it's sucked up all of the information.
Well, there's reality. It's just bending reality because that's all the black holes do. They're just constantly bending space and time. But the interesting thing is, I've always had this theory that at some point, I mean, this theory could still hold to be true, but that at some point all the black holes basically collide with each other. You create this supermassive black hole that sucks in everything, and then once it has all the information, it bursts back out, right? And you have a big
Right.
bang, right? So... Well, this kind of like didn't even like touch on that theory. They were just saying it so that something like that doesn't happen. Well, then eventually black holes will also die out. Like black holes do have an end date.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, they do. Now, as far as what happens when the black holes die, all they said in the video was like basically they like disintegrate, like they're just no more. They get smaller and smaller and smaller until they're just nothing. I don't know if I believe in that.
Weird.
But
I don't know either if I agree with that.
and then basically
make a lot of
after
sense.
that they were saying, oh, and then this, after that was total speculation of like, that's when they started getting into things like with string theory and like
So
what could possibly
up to
exist.
100 trillion years, it's solid. But then 100 trillion and one. We're speculating now. We're speculating. We don't know.
Yes,
after
exactly. But what blew my mind about it the most was just how young our universe is even after the last star dies.
Yeah.
The fact that it
that's
continues
insane.
on for that long. And because it wasn't just like, oh, you have a trillion years of light and then a trillion years of darkness and that's it. It was you have a trillion years of light and then just trillion to, 100 billion, times 100 billion of universe still left to exist in general.
It's just rocking and rolling.
It's
It's insane,
that shit
dude.
just blows my mind, dude. Anytime I think about that kind of stuff. But super interesting video.
So how long did people make it into the video?
They didn't go into like people and civilization at all. They literally just start from 2019. They were just like, so here's what's happening in the universe from 2019 on.
We probably made it like 14 seconds. We're probably done after that.
If that. I know they went into a little bit like at the beginning of like before they went to like the stars dying, they were talking about like, oh, our star dying. So they were talking about the time when our sun will expand before it dies and it will engulf us and Mars and some of the other inner rocky
lovely.
planets. Yeah. Fun. Ooh, excuse me. Fun shit. But yeah, I mean, it was a blip. It was a blip on the radar. You know what I mean? So there's so much more to exist, dude. And then it just makes you wonder more, like, well, what does it all mean? If we're this small little fucking blip of the entire lifespan of the universe, regardless of how
but
advanced we get.
You know what's really interesting is they've also done math. They, again, gotta love they.
Yeah.
But scientists have done some math, and I've read about it, and it's actually possible that people can populate the galaxy. Like, not just our solar system, but the fucking the Milky Way, the galaxy. So even if there was, like, our sun that engulfed this whole solar system, theoretically, it is possible for mankind, to keep going.
Yeah.
Like
true.
mathematically, there's enough time in our life and blah, 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 all the variables put together that we could populate the galaxy.
I wonder where we would get energy from, though, if we didn't have any light. Or I mean, at this point, I'm sure we have found other ways.
Well, I think every
to
solar
get
system has
energy.
a sun.
Well, I'm talking about, though, beyond a point where all the stars are dead. Do you think
Oh.
like humans could exist beyond that point? No.
Nah, you gotta have light. Nah.
Because I was thinking maybe not on a planet, But if you had there was a really bad sci-fi movie that came out, but they had an interesting concept in there. And the movie was called Valerian. And
Not to put on blast or anything.
I think Vince and I already did in a previous podcast. We talked a lot of shit about that movie. But the concept of it was really interesting, where there was basically this giant floating civilization that a bunch of different species of alien all kind of cohabited.
Like a huge ship or something? Like the size of a planet almost?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Okay.
Misshapen and everything, but just floating through space.
Okay.
And people live on this. There's different areas. Yeah, exactly. Right. And so, I thought, maybe something like that could happen. But again, it would just depend on where the civilization's getting its energy from. You can't get your energy from light at that point. If we maybe find a way to harness energy from, dark matter or dark energy or something that we know is already around, maybe life could continue on from there. Or, if we figure out fusion and figure out how to just create a fucking star, well, then you don't even have to worry about stars dying.
Well, I was actually thinking about this the other night. This is interesting because you're talking about how do we keep energy going, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I think that you could have perpetual energy in space.
Yeah, you're talking about that.
I think that it's possible through centrifugal force in space of two objects orbiting each other to have more energy created than is expelled by the objects moving,
right? Which
would be perpetual motion. Mm-hmm. You can't do that on Earth. It's not possible. But we've been watching these videos of this
Universe Sandbox.
Yeah, Universe Sandbox 2 is what they call it. And basically it's the whole universe, and you can set things up and just plop down planets and stars, whatever you fucking want to do. Right?
But it's scientifically accurate with how they all interact with each other.
Super accurate. Yeah. It's not really a game. It's a simulator.
Yes.
It's science. But the guy who we watch who plays it, he does things where he will have an object move forever and constantly speed up through space and he does it by orbiting another object.
Right.
So I think that for motion, we'll end up using something like that in the future. I don't even think it'll be a matter of burning any kind of fuel.
Right.
I think burning fuel will be caveman technology.
Oh yeah, beyond caveman
technology. I don't think that you'll even have to mine something and then burn it. I think we'll just use the forces of nature to move. Yeah. And centrifugal force, not centrifugal force, perpetual motion. There is one example of it in existence in reality, and that's light. Light makes its own energy, and it never slows down. Right. It always moves the same speed constantly until it hits something.
Yeah.
So that is an example of nature performing perpetual motion.
Yeah.
So it's not totally just a theory. It actually happens. We just have to figure out how to mimic it.
What an interesting existence that would be, though. Imagine there's no more stars. There's everything's black dwarfs or already sucked up by black dwarfs, right? Or by black holes. So there's literally nothing, and there's just these little these little giant satellite-esque things floating around that just have different kinds of human civilizations on. It's almost like those are the new planets, right? So it's all of a sudden people would
yeah, you can make artificial planets.
Exactly. Like Death Stars. There'd just be Death Stars everywhere.
I was going to say they would end up being spheres.
Yeah, but they would just travel through space. You would just have to find ways to make sure. Or I wonder if they'd make them travel through space, or if they would find a black hole to orbit. Because you can orbit a black hole as long as you're far away from it.
Well, I don't. If there's no stars left, you mean when there's no stars?
Yeah. I'm talking
Yeah, I guess you would orbit a black hole. Future, yeah. Why not? I think it would start to get kind of weird with electronics and stuff. You would probably want to be away from black holes.
Well, I know if I know if you're far away enough, you're not going to have an issue. So, for example,
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, if you switch this, our sun, if you took away our sun and put a black hole there with the same mass as our sun, we wouldn't get, sucked up into it or anything. Our orbits would actually all stay the same. I mean, human life would die because we'd get
freeze.
Super cold.
Yeah.
but as far as being able to, without any like issue happening, you know, electronic wise or like space time being bent around you or whatnot. As long as you're far enough away from that black hole, you should be fine.
What if, I mean, if we figure out how to live on as a species long enough to the point that stars start dying out,
Yeah.
and it becomes an actual issue for survival of our species, right? That we need a star. Because really, you need it for heat and for light.
Yes.
I mean, by that time, it's not totally unplausible, if we've already made it this far, that we could create our own stars.
That's what I was saying earlier, yeah.
I mean, all you have to do, really, to create a star is throw enough objects, enough mass into each other at really high speeds.
Yeah.
It's not too high, because then they'll tunnel through each other. You got to have it slow enough that they collide and create heat, and then enough mass and heat will just kind of engulf into a star.
Well, at that point,
like if you throw enough Jupiters together, it'll make a star eventually.
True. Well, at that point, though, especially because there would be, you know, you're talking about if there's no more stars, so you're talking about a bunch of random dark planets, you know, running around without any orbit or whatnot. So you would either have to find a way to gather a bunch of these dark planets or black dwarfs and get them to collide with each other in a singular place to create this thing with enough mass to create a star, which would take a lot of fucking mass. Or
it's pretty much impossible. You're never going to create a real star.
Exactly.
It'd have to be an artificial star.
Exactly. So then you would have to find a way to do, because at this point, if there's nothing else left, well, you're kind of running out of options of things to put all together at once, you know, to create mass.
You'd be better off having like a giant nuclear fusion machine.
And that's space. What I would think. Or finding a way to be able to manipulate like dark energy or dark matter. If you could control those things and get those things to condense down into one spot to create a star, I mean, that could possibly be possible. But dark matter and dark energy are all just theories still. It's literally something we can't see. We could just watch how it behaves, and we're not even sure it's behaving the way we think it is.
Yeah, but we're assuming that we're living on as a species through multiple galaxies. So there would be trillions or hundreds of trillions of humans alive all at the same time across multiple galaxies, living for hundreds of billions of years. So the science is going to be out of this fucking world by then. We're going to understand all kinds of shit.
It's like at that point, it's like we're not even going to have an issue.
There's certain things we would have to understand just to get to that point.
Yeah.
I mean, a human being doesn't live long enough to travel in space. Like a human's life, even if you could put yourself to sleep, by the time you get to where you're going, the people who you were from, they're all dead by the time you even get. So even if you're alive, everyone else you know and love is dead. So you have to move faster. Now there's limitations by physics of how fast you can move. You can't go faster than light. And really, you can't even get close to the speed of light and still exist as a solid being. Right? We become plasma beings. So that leaves only a few options. You know, so we would have to have something like warp drive.
Yes.
We would have to be able to manipulate dark matter, like you're saying. We'd have to be able to manipulate actual
You'd have to be able to bend space-time, is what it is.
So
you'd have to be able to delve into fourth-dimensional physics and stuff at that point, which, I mean, is really not out of the ordinary for us to be able to possibly, you know, conjure.
I don't know if you can ever go up in dimensions, though. I think you can only go down.
No, I think you can, because I think that's what black holes do. I think black holes bend space-time around you to create kind of this fourth-dimensional space. But they're created in a three-dimensional space so that you can experience a fourth-dimensional space.
Well, and we only assume that they're fourth-dimensional. We don't know that they actually make anything happen.
Well, kind of, sort of. We've been able to do enough research. Essentially that is what they are.
We just don't know where the information goes.
Well, it's this. I was watching this other video on YouTube once that was kind of going into it a little bit, because we have been able to gather enough information from black holes to know that, because really, if you're able to, we use these terms in different situations, but really they're the same thing. Bending space time is kind of creating this fourth dimensional space within a third dimension. Because if we look at fourth dimension as time, and you're able to bend space time, well, that becomes a fourth dimensional space at that point. Yeah, interacting with it, exactly.
Right, I got you.
So we know that when you're falling into a black hole, it's basically if you're going to take a flat blanket and then constantly just pull down the middle of that blanket to, infinity, that's really what you're getting from a black hole. So you're interacting with a fourth dimensional space.
But even a black hole isn't infinity. There's a bottom of a black hole.
Oh, well, that we do not know.
We don't know.
Because,
but there's a little grain of sand in there.
Well, that's
what's creating all the mass.
Well, yeah, so that's the assumption.
That's the assumption, true. No one's ever been in there.
Yeah, the singularity, right?
But yeah, somewhere in there is a little marble.
But there may possibly not also. If you look at it in the sense of where you have something that has so much mass to where it's able to just pull everything inward.
Even light.
I would argue that singularity you have anymore isn't even like a singularity, or not a singularity, but nothing tangible.
Object.
Yeah, it's nothing tangible. It's just something is what it is. Because when you get into things like I'm trying to think of what the word is. So you don't have anything tangible. Okay, so when you get into things like the Fibonacci sequence, for example, which is into like sacred geometry, and the whole idea with the Fibonacci sequence isn't the idea of just like exact symmetry, but what it is it's this, and you guys have seen it before. It looks like a swirling spiral,
Well, that's how it manifests itself.
That's how it
nature.
manifests itself.
You'll see it in flowers. You'll see it in snail shells.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the thing with the Fibonacci sequence though is it's never ending. It's infinite. So if you're able to follow this and map it, it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller without ever reaching a center. Well, that's the idea with a black hole. It gets smaller and smaller and smaller, but it doesn't actually ever have a center. It's just constantly space being pulled on itself.
But in this reality, there's actually a word for it, where it is the smallest unit of measurement that can be considered to exist in this space-time continuum, according to our physics. So, like you're saying, the whole point you're making, I agree with. It has to be fourth dimensional, because otherwise it wouldn't be able to exist.
But that's my point, though. If something like a black hole that can create a fourth dimensional space can exist within the third dimension, it wouldn't be totally out of the ordinary that, an unfathomable amount of time in the future, we're able to manipulate space-time ourselves to create these types of pockets or, wormholes to be able to travel or harness energy maybe in different ways. In a way, because in a way, black holes are
I don't know about wormholes. To me, wormholes are more sci-fi than warp drive is.
Yeah, which is funny because I almost think wormholes are more tangible than warp drive is.
Well, for me, the only problem with wormholes, okay, and I'm just thinking super elementary about this because I don't understand a lot of physics and shit, but the basic concept is you're on a plane, so you're on a piece of paper. You need to get from one end of the piece of paper to the other. So you fold the piece of paper in half, and then you can just go right across real quick, and you move a huge amount of distance in a short amount of time.
Yes.
Okay. Cool. I accept that you're on one side of the piece of paper. So I accept that you can move your side of the piece of paper up, that you can fold your side up. But how the fuck are you getting to the other side where you want to be?
Right.
To interact with that side, to fold that side up towards you. That's my only issue with it.
Well, I think.
Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
Okay.
But the way I think you're looking at it is you're looking at it as like this flat plane, and then that both sides have to get folded up upwards for the two ends to meet.
That is indeed how I'm looking at it.
Well, instead, I would look at it as like a plane that's vertical. And the only thing that has to get flipped up is the bottom end up to the top end. So the top part of the paper doesn't move at all, but you have to move the bottom end where you are up to the top. Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
So at that point, that's not moving. It's just the bottom part that's moving.
I completely picture what you're saying in your head, and I hadn't thought of that. But to me, that's just traveling. It would be like instantaneous traveling.
Well,
You know what I mean? But
that's
you're
what a
still
wormhole
moving
is,
the whole
though.
amount of distance. I guess that's true.
Yeah,
It's,
but I mean
to me,
that's why it's called fourth dimension, though. Is because
I-
you're totally getting rid of that time. You're bending space time, right?
the concept of warp drive is a little more tangible to me because all you're doing is affecting the space in front of you. So you're somehow compressing the space in front of you and simultaneously expanding the space behind you.
Right.
And by doing that, you're not deleting anything, so you're not getting rid of any information, and you're also not technically moving any faster. You're just moving a longer period of distance in a shorter amount of time.
Right.
But you're not actually, your speed is not increasing. So you never end up going faster than the speed of light. However, you do move quicker than light does, if that makes any sense.
It doesn't to me because it just sounds like you're describing a wormhole just in a different way.
It's like a small wormhole over and over and over. It's like small bangs of
Right.
wormholes. Boom, 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 boom. And to me, my brain gets that more because you're just compressing what's immediately in front of you. Like, I don't know. I never thought about the line and then only you have to move towards your point. I always thought both points had to move at the same time, which I was like, how are you moving that other point? It's so
Right.
far away,
Yeah.
you know? So, I mean, usually we end up inventing the things that we think of.
Yeah.
So do you think we'll ever actually get to that point? I think we'll invent something like that.
I think we will, simply because it's when we are able to see that something already exists, that something can already exist in nature. The one thing we always try to do is recreate that thing that happens in nature. I remember this was years ago, but what's interesting about that, though, is there are some things that we're just not able to recreate for whatever reason. One interesting thing I saw in this documentary years ago, and it was just a nature documentary, and all it was talking about was there's this tree that, like, in order for it to, repopulate itself, its seeds fall off and everything, but the seeds on it have these little, like, 2 leaves at the very top, so they make them turn like a helicopter as they're all starting to slowly go down and everything, but they do it in a very specific way that's just very, I don't know how to describe it, but it caught the attention of a lot of like aerospace like engineers and stuff like that, right?
All right,
but
gotcha.
for whatever reason they're not able to recreate the movement that this thing created in
interesting.
nature.
It's kind of like hummingbirds.
Hummingbirds going to be my next
we can't
example.
actually recreate with a machine how their wings move.
Exactly.
Their wings are like phenomenal, dude.
So for all we know, something like, even though we know black holes can exist and bend space-time and things, those might be things that we just, for whatever reason, just will never be able to recreate. I mean, it could just be something simple as just not understanding the science. Maybe we just are missing something in the hummingbird science, you know?
And also, I don't think that we're limited to the tools that we have right now.
Right.
So I still think that there's going to be advances in technology that make us look like we're in the dark age right now.
Yes, definitely.
So like how there was electricity that was invented, and then like humankind, no matter where you lived on the planet, your life was affected by the discovery of electricity. Because it's not an invention. You didn't create something. You discovered something that was already there.
Right.
I think there's still lots of discoveries to be made that are going to be like the internal combustion engine. Something that propels human beings forward so much that there's no going back. I think that if we ever get to a point where we need to make stars, we'll have had that happen many, many, many times.
Oh, yes.
We'll be a completely different species by then.
It's gonna be, well, that's one thing too when you think about those kind of things is we're not even going to be like what we are now. We're gonna look back at how humans looked and behaved now and just be like peasants.
Oh yeah, dude. There's a thing, you can look it up online, but there's a thing called like a manpower unit. So you know how they have like horsepower?
Yeah.
Well, they have manpower. And they relate it. It's something along the lines of a caveman. Okay, so a human being like butt naked in the forest with no technology. Just what you can do with your body in nature is one man unit. Okay. So people in the beginning had one man unit, and they had to team up to get multiple units and stuff, right? Now, like today, in comparison, one human being with the technology that one person is capable of having is like 20,000 man units. Like one person could wipe out whole fucking civilizations of cavemen by themselves if we could use the technology we have in our house.
That's true.
You know what I mean? Like we've come that far. So give it, and that's only been, let's say 10,000 years, just to be ridiculous. I don't even think it's been that long. So give it 100,000 more years, which is not that ridiculous. We'll still be around.
Right.
Dude, we'll be at 1 million manpower units for every human.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Well, we're going to be an interplanetary species easily by then, possibly intergalaxy species, you know.
We'll be interplanetary possibly in years in mine's lifetime.
Yeah.
You'll probably see it. Because once we get a colony somewhere else, we're technically interplanetary.
Yeah, I think it'll definitely happen in our lifetime. I think we hope it'll happen, you know, when we're, you know, a little younger and maybe our 30s. But I think it's going to be one of those, we're going to be old men by the time we finally get a fucking grasp on what's going down.
They'll get there. I mean, they'll go to Mars.
Yes.
I think they'll have a person walk on Mars while we're still young men, you know, in the next 10 years, 15 years, whatever. But actually having like a colony, it could take 30, 50, 60 years after someone walks on it.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the moon. That we know of, there's no moon colonies or moon bases.
That we know of. Yes.
I would be a little shocked if in reality there's not. But and people walked on the moon, 40, 50 years ago?
I think that's what we should be focusing. I mean, I think we've talked about this before, but I think that's what we should be focusing on. I mean, we're so yeah.
I think the issue with the moon is there's nothing there. There's no minerals. There's no resources. There's no gas.
I mean, I guess
it's just a rock.
I mean, but in not saying that it has to or can be colonized in the same way that you would colonize Mars. But if we want to go the steps of colonizing Mars, you know, to me, it would make sense to have this base on the moon to where, like, maybe the base on the moon just solely acts as, you know, nowhere near halfway, but just as another base of like, okay, we're going to set, you know, you guys are going to go to Mars today. We're going to send you off. You're going to stay on the moon for a few months until Mars is in the right position. We're going to make sure we refuel you, do whatever it is we need to do. And then we're going to launch you from the moon over to Mars.
Right.
You know, like, to me, that makes more sense, but maybe that's just something that has to come with after we colonize Mars.
Yeah, everywhere you go along the way, like to get the funding to go to a celestial body to start building on it, that takes money. And you're only going to get investors if they plan on getting some kind of return out of what they're putting into it.
Right.
So the same way that the colonies were created here on Earth with the different continents, they didn't just go willy-nilly all over the place. The Spanish and the European, they went to Mexico and Central America, and they didn't go there to make the lives of the indigenous people better. They went there to get fucking gold.
Right.
You know, that's what they put their money and their effort into building ships and then building colonies because they thought they were going to get gold out of it.
Yeah.
Then they didn't get as much gold as they thought, and they ended up growing stuff and whatever. It became a civilization.
Right.
So I think the first things you're going to see is you're going to see Mars because that is a status symbol. You know what I mean? The first country to get to Mars, it just kind of kicks ass. But really what you're going to see a lot of is space tourism, is flying around within our orbit, you know, and you're going to see a lot of mining endeavors, I think, on like asteroids.
Yes.
And rocks out in space. And those mining endeavors for the resources are what's going to create the technology that will get us into colonization efforts, is what I personally think.
No, I agree with you. I think one thing that would further it more too is if we discovered, you know, minerals on Mars. That would be I don't know what kind of minerals they believe are on Mars right now, but if we discover, like, if all of a sudden we go to Mars, we're like, oh, let's go, there's this mountain over here, let's go hike up it and see, what's over there. And all of a sudden we find this valley of just fucking gold, right? Just like thousands upon thousands of pounds of gold.
What if it's a totally new resource that we have zero of on Earth?
Ooh, that would
like
be
a new
something,
kind of,
huh?
Think of when they invented gunpowder.
Mm-hmm.
It was something that one day people didn't have.
Right.
The next day they had it and life was different.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine if we find a powder or something edible or something that propels us into a whole new world of science.
Oof.
And you can only get it by going to Mars.
I think that's what the movie Avatar was about.
Was it?
Yeah, I think the whole thing was they wanted
blue
to get
people?
they wanted to get rid of the blue people because there was some new mineral that they never discovered before.
It was a lot of metaphors in that
A lot
movie.
of metaphors. It was Pocahontas and Ferngully had a baby. That's what that was. But
Yeah, for like 4.5 hours.
yes. Hair sex, whatever.
But yeah, man, space is cool. It's making a comeback.
Yes,
it was
by
was
far.
cool in our parents' day. It kind of died out for a while.
Which I'm so happy about because I love the space stuff and things like that. And what's really cool and what I really appreciate about space, and you could really use this argument for technology in general, is that like things like movies, when stuff like space gets popular, you have these movies and stuff that come out and they, some of them are outlanders, some of them are just, your typical outlanders sci-fi movies.
Right.
But then you have ones that, they'll have the astrophysicist on set at all times as, a consultant
like The Martian.
and things. Yeah, The Martian's a perfect example
Martian's a
of
good
that. And what's
Could've picked
really
a better actor.
if you guys want to know more
Personal
about that,
belief.
listen to our past podcast. But we have a lot of opinions about Matt Damon. God, I'm gonna
Well,
meet
I
him
do.
one day, and he's gonna be like, "So I listened to your podcast," and
I'll be afraid to even go shake his hand. I'm like, he doesn't like me. I know he doesn't like me.
like I've said so much shit about you. I'm so sorry. But anyways, what's cool about these movies is they come out, and it's not so much The Martian because The Martian was very much planted in like the now, like what we have currently. It wasn't
Yes.
so much about new technology.
Right.
But like some of the sci-fi movies that come out where directors and filmmakers want to explore what we could possibly on a very valid level, like with the kind of technology that we'll have in the future.
Yeah, like Star Trek did in its day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Those are the things that are all of a sudden watched and they're like, I feel like we could make that happen.
Dude, Star Trek invented all kinds of shit that we use today.
Yeah, didn't they have a whole documentary series about
Literally,
that? Yeah.
there's like a lot. Like they invented the smartphone. They
Yeah.
invented. That's an easy one, but
Yeah.
no, there's like multiple different devices that we use commonly today that were totally invented by Star Trek.
Yeah.
They didn't exist before that.
One example of that too that I found super interesting was in the movie Interstellar. When they made the black hole in
That's
the
the
movie
one with Sandy B?
Interstellar. No, you can always mix those up. That's the one with McConaughey.
Oh, okay, it's McConaughey. Okay, gotcha.
There's this. So they same thing. They had a astrophysicist on set at all times as a consultant. His name was Kip Thorne. He's done the consulting for a lot.
That's
of
the one where he goes
sci-fi
into the black
movies.
hole at the end.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But
Okay.
the black hole itself, though, the way
interesting.
that the black hole actually looked, that was, because remember, at this point, we didn't have a picture of a black hole. This was just...
We do now. We have a legit picture of one.
That's the point I'm getting at.
Oh.
So the general consensus amongst astrophysicists is that if you were able to see a black hole up close, this is what it would look like.
Right.
And for those who haven't seen the movie, it's literally that. It's a black hole, and it looks like there's a series of like rings of light surrounding it, right? As it's slowly
That's really
being pulled
it'd be
into
an
the black
invisible
hole.
spot with a bunch of light around it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Because black holes are actually invisible.
yes.
There's no light coming out of them.
So what's interesting about that is all of a sudden we get this picture of a black hole, and it looks exactly how all the astrophysicists were like, we're pretty sure it looks like this, and all of a sudden we get this picture back. We're like, yep,
That's
there
what it looks
is.
like.
That's what
Yeah.
it looks like.
Phenomenal picture. If you guys have not
Yeah.
seen that, Google it right now. Put this on pause. Google the black hole picture. It's phenomenal.
So cool. Well, and what's really cool about that picture is everything. The picture that was floating around, and the first one that you guys will probably see when you search it, is literally that. You're just going to see the small black hole with a little bit of light surrounding it, right?
Yeah, it's not like a close up, guys. It's not.
Right.
I mean, it
It's
looks
as close as
very
we'll ever get,
pixely and rudimentary, but it's phenomenal. It's a fucking black hole.
But what's really cool is, so that was the first picture I saw also. And then I saw this other article that was like, here's the picture that's floating around. And then they go, let me show you the full picture.
Oh, shit.
So then they back up So they show you like where the little box was that of the picture that's floating around, and they back up, and there's just all of it. It looks like somebody like spilled coffee, right? It looks like just blotches of light just around, kind of going down to the right of this black hole. And what they were explaining was this is literally light years away from the black hole, traveling to the black hole to be sucked into its gravity, because this was a picture of a super massive black hole that we got. So the little picture that's floating around of the actual black hole and all its glory is like such a small part of the picture. Wow. The big picture was all the light surrounding it that is getting sucked into it.
That's fucking crazy.
It's crazy to look at. And this was a super massive black hole. This wasn't like a black hole the size of our sun.
No, it's like what's in the middle of the Milky Way.
Yeah, exactly.
Those are in the middle of galaxies.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And it's just, oh my gosh,
yeah,
dude.
so Earth is in a solar system, and then there's a shit ton of solar systems inside of a galaxy.
Yes. And then the galaxy is just a bunch of solar systems orbiting a black hole.
Yes.
Yes.
Wow. Damn.
Damn is right, dude. Crazy shit. Space is fucking crazy. Black holes are crazy.
Black holes are crazy because the only thing you can see is the effect of it. You'll never get to see the actual object.
Yes.
You can only see how it interacts with the stuff around it.
Exactly.
Because the whole point of seeing is you take light into your eyes. So if there's no light escaping, you can't see it.
It just gets sucked in, man. But, well, and that's what's cool, too. So, like, if you were to look at a black hole, assuming you were able to get anywhere close to a black hole that didn't have light surrounding it, right? You would still be able to make out where it was, because it would be bending the space-time around it, right?
Yeah, but if you, like, straight in the middle of it would be invisible.
No, straight in the middle, yeah.
It'd be invisible.
It's the black of black.
Yeah, it wouldn't even be dark. It would be invisible. All you would see is the distortion of whatever's in front of it, the light in front of it being distorted.
Yes.
So you would probably be able to tell that distortion. Let's assume there's one that's like 12 feet wide. You know what I mean? So you can see the whole thing in your vision, standing away from it a little bit. You would be able to see the distortion and know it's there, but it wouldn't, I don't even know if it would look round. Like there would be absolutely no telling of when you're getting close to it.
It would definitely look around. There's definitely, that's what like the event horizon is. It's basically the border of a black hole, because even if there's not light, you would still be able to see like the time bent around it. So like assuming there was some kind of light source from somewhere, you know, if there's no light source from anywhere, you're not going to see it. But most black holes are sucking in light. So that's why we're able to see that it's clearly, you know, a spherical object, but it's just a spherical object that's constantly getting sucked into itself. So because we've been able to see pictures and stuff from like, I guess saying the side of a black hole is kind of redundant, but like, we know that black holes spit off energy. Sphere. Yeah, it's a black sphere. So we know that black holes spit like energy out from both ends too. So we know that happens.
They'll burp
yeah, the burp. Because I know before we actually had the picture of the black hole, we had a small little video that it wasn't even a video, it's like a GIF, right? And it was literally the only reason why we knew it was a black hole was because we just happened to get this little video clip when it happened to be spewing out this energy.
Oh, shit.
And it literally looks like just blackness, and all of a sudden there's just this little like fart that comes out of the left end, right? Really quick. And it's funny, you watch it, and you're like, oh, that's, you know, whatever, it's just something small, and they're like, but you don't understand. It's like that little fart that you saw was like millions of light years of this shit getting just in like a second.
Yeah, just
like just crazy shit, dude. But oh my gosh, man. But black holes, I don't know if we'll ever reach a point where we have the technology to travel or send objects inside of a black hole. At least nothing that can send information back.
You'd have to move faster than the speed of light.
Yeah.
Which, according to physics, is impossible.
Correct. Well, yeah.
No, it is.
Well,
it's impossible to move faster than the speed of light.
Well, we know. Well, the reason why I hesitate is because so there's no piece of matter per se that can move faster than the speed of light.
Well, it
But,
wouldn't
like,
be observable, at least.
Right.
It would technically be impossible to observe any matter that went faster.
But technically, our
not that it
universe
couldn't
expands.
exist.
Well, technically, our universe expands faster than the speed of light.
That is true, because you can't see the edge of the universe.
Right.
Because it takes too long it goes away from you faster
Right.
than
So
the
light
light
can never
comes towards
reach
you.
it. Yeah, exactly.
There is a breaking point. That's the observable universe.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, but that just comes back to the only way we'd be able to do it is if we could manipulate dark matter and dark energy, which, who knows? A billion, trillion years from now, who knows what the fuck we can do?
And who knows that the laws of physics aren't going to get rewritten along the way.
That's true. I never even thought about that.
As we move along in time, we're starting to find a couple of instances in reality, in space, of things that do kind of break physics. That's why now we have this whole new thing called quantum physics.
Yes.
You know, we're like, okay, well, if it doesn't fall into regular physics, it's because it's quantum physics now.
What's so funny,
Which just means physics is wrong.
yes,
Is all that means.
It's quantum and metaphysics. Well, it's what's really funny to me about quantum physics is I remember when I was super young, back in like grade school, and I would see whatever space documentary with my dad was on, right, and we'd be watching it, and you'd have somebody who would come on and they're talking about quantum physics, and you would ask, and I'd ask my dad what quantum physics is, and in so many words, he'd basically just tell me, well, it's bullshit. It's basically
Well, I mean, yeah.
well, at the time, it definitely
Right.
was. It was something laughable,
Yes, yes, yeah.
But now we're at a point to where, over the past 20 years, there's been more and more things that quantum physicists have theorized that we're now proving to be true in regular physics. So now it's funny living in this age where something that was laughable, a piece of science that was laughable, is now like, oh yeah, that's just a thing. If you're a physicist, you have to study quantum physics because it's a part of it now.
Stuff acts differently at that level.
Yeah.
When you get stuff small enough, it acts differently.
Or big enough, yeah.
I was going to say, I assume big enough too. It's interesting to me. Life is just a system over and over and over.
Yes.
From anything as small as a cell up to as big as a galaxy. It's like looks and runs the same way.
It's cogs and gears working on an infinite level. It's just
crazy. All the levels are exactly the same. They just get bigger and bigger and bigger.
And then even on the highest level that you can get, well, assumingly it just loops around to the beginning again. That's infinite.
So a quick side note I wanted to say earlier too, and I forgot. When you were talking about the fourth dimensions and experiencing the fourth dimension in this one, there is one way that I've thought of that you can fully experience the fourth dimension while still totally being a third dimensional being.
Okay.
I've thought about this, and I think it's pretty solid. Okay, and you might pick it apart real quickly here, and that's okay if you do. Video games. So when you play a video game, you are essentially a fourth dimensional being. You're experiencing a fourth dimension. You can go backwards and forward through time. You can save the game and go back to save points, which means you can literally have multiple realities of the same story happening at the same time. You can save them all, and you can play on all those different multiple realities of the same story. If you die, you come back. You get multiple lives. You can use cheat codes. You can put yourself anywhere you want at any time. It's the closest you're gonna get to being a fourth dimensional being for a minute.
So I agree. I think you just used the wrong word. I think that's a great representation of like what a fourth dimension would be, right? Because that's what it is. You have and I would actually go farther in being able to use a video game to explain what the fifth dimension would be like.
Oh, I don't even know. About that.
So you'll follow me pretty quickly on it.
Okay.
So let's go back to the fourth dimensional thing, right? So you have let's use the game Last of Us as an example, because Last of Us is a good, solid, linear storyline, right? Regardless of where you start in the game. So you have the game The Last of Us, and you get so far, and you're able to save it. You die or something, so you're able to go back, change something you did, but it's all still happening on this very linear storyline. So no matter how many times you go back, you might be able to change little things. You might be able to change when you die, but the ending result is always the same, right? So a fifth dimension would be like playing a game like Heavy Rain or Detroit Become Human, where you're able to save, you're able to go back, but you can go back and change things to go off on a very different timeline.
Okay.
So that would be kind of like the representation of what a fifth dimension would be. And then at the end, there's a lot of different ways that it could end, but you're still on that kind of timeline. So now the argument with going beyond to like a sixth dimension would be if you look at the fifth dimension and you look at, let's look at one of the characters, for example, in Detroit Become Human. One of the characters' name is Marcus, and he's this android that's leading the revolution for the androids, right?
Right.
So no matter how many times you go back and play that game as Marcus, you might be able to change Marcus's story and Marcus's ending, but you're not changing the core of what Marcus is, and that is an android leading the revolution. Regardless of what storyline you get, it's still the storyline of Marcus leading a revolution.
Okay.
Whereas the sixth dimension now gets into this space of being able to go back and say, okay, well, Marcus is now going to be a chef for the rest of his life. And now he's going to go down this road and visit those paths that you could do.
So The Sims would be more of a sixth dimension.
Yeah. At a basic level, Sims gets a little more complicated, I think, than that. But yeah, essentially,
I think you could find loose ways to relate it all the way up to pretty much all the dimensions. Because the 10th dimension, the largest dimension is creation, right? It's the creator. It would essentially be God to most people. And you really are that in a video game. If you're a programmer, you're the creator. You make an entire reality whatever you want it to be.
Well,
you can change it and manipulate it at a moment's notice.
I would say 10th dimension. If we were using this video game analogy and moving it all the way up to like the 10th dimension,
I think you'd be able to.
I think the 10th dimension would just be the PlayStation 4. With like just taking the PS4 as an example, is taking the PlayStation 4 and every game that could exist on the PlayStation 4 is on that particular PlayStation. You can go and play every single one in every single different way that you want.
I think it wouldn't even be playing all the different games. It would be the person making the games actually being like programming.
True.
Would be the highest dimension.
Yeah.
Because you are creating the reality that other realities play.
But then that's the cool thing about using these like metaphors and analogies too, and that's kind of what sacred geometry plays on, right? And that's what the Fibonacci sequence plays on, is that everything on the highest level works the same way at the lowest level and vice versa. And that's why we're able to make these comparisons between dimensions in video games, because it works on a video game level, but it also works on a reality level too. And then it works on something beyond reality also. And it just
what if we're all
goes
just
up in
avatars?
infinite.
We're all just avatars of a game that aliens are playing.
That's a theory.
And when we go to sleep, it's because the aliens are saving their game and going to go do their thing.
It's a theory, man. It's a fucking theory.
And we don't even know we're doing it.
Yeah.
We just know all of a sudden we get tired, we go to sleep, we turn off.
And it's those days you have where you're like, gosh, I've been up for like 10 hours. I'm not even tired. Like, I wonder, or I've been up 10 hours. I've been up for, like 20 hours. I'm not even tired. What's going on?
We're just avatars.
It's like, yeah, just binge playing. Yeah.
Because Mario would have absolutely no idea that he's a fake character.
True.
Let's assume Mario's alive and is a real thing. Like, he would have no idea. He would just know that every day he wakes up in the Mushroom Kingdom and he's just compelled to go save the princess for whatever reason. That's just that's what he really wants to do in life. He would have absolutely no clue that something else is making him do that.
That'd be kind of a very disappointing life, though.
I don't think he would even know.
Ignorance and all of a sudden, ignorance is bliss.
He would think that he's totally happy and that it's his choice to go save the princess.
But I mean, like, just speaking on the like sense of like if you died and then all of a sudden you found out like that's what it was. Like hi, I'm Bjork Zork. I was playing as you. Like it's a pleasure to finally meet you. Yeah. It's a pleasure to meet you. I had a great time. But yeah,
that's funny. I don't think we are, but we could be.
No, it's so funny on this. Just as a last note here on this podcast, between like you and Vince and Kyle, and I think even Thomas a little bit, I've talked about dimension stuff so much. Hopefully everybody has a real good understanding about dimensions.
It's the Hardly Dimension podcast.
The Hardly Dimension podcast. Yes. We'll have to start just a side podcast that's just, okay, we're going to talk about the seventh dimension today.
Dude, they're not that terribly complicated once you start to break them down.
That's true.
They're really, really not. If you start in the beginning and you just add a little bit at a time, and pictures help a lot.
Yeah, well, and just as we were doing with relating it back to video games, stuff like that really helps
really
to kind of relate it.
It's really not incredibly crazy complicated, dude.
No.
It's the lasagna of reality.
Yeah.
Is all it really is.
Exactly. And hopefully,
and I understand it perfectly.
There you go, guys.
So.
Not really. There's the theories out there that when we die, all we're going to do is simply just experience the same life we are now, but just from a fourth dimensional perspective. So we'll see what happens when we die.
We'll see. I don't know.
We'll podcast about it.
Okay,
I'm sure there's a Hardly Millennial in the fourth dimension somewhere.
Fuck yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. Had a lot of fun talking about space and dimensions, as we usually do. Remember, you can follow us on all the social media platforms. And remember, we do have a Patreon, www.patreon.com/Hardly Millennial. And Matthew, any final thoughts?
Make sure to share this, guys, so that it goes out and the aliens pick it up in their antennas.
The aliens.
And they can hear us talking about them. You got to share it with your friends, guys.
Share it with your friends and comment #black hole if you made it to the end. If you made it to the end, #black hole, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Love you. Goodbye.
Bye.